Commander Sarah Chen sat in the sterile observation deck of the Galactic Court Station, watching through reinforced glass as her 19-year-old son Marcus stood before the three-judge panel. The blue-skinned Carathian judges loomed over him like ancient monuments, their six eyes glowing with cold judgment. Behind them, holographic evidence flickered in the air. Surveillance footage, weapon scans, testimonies from witnesses who had never even met her boy. Marcus Chen, human designation 7749 Delta. The center judge's voice boomed through the chamber's universal translators. You stand accused of the murder of Counselor Vextar Millennial and the destruction of property on Kepler Station. How do you plead? Marcus lifted his chin, his young face pale but determined. Not guilty, Your Honors. I was defending myself and the other workers. Counselor Vextar was silence. The judge's voice cracked like a whip. The evidence is overwhelming. 17 witnesses saw you discharge a plasma rifle. The counselor's body shows burns consistent with human-manufactured weapons. Security footage places you at the scene. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. She knew what really happened on Kepler Station. Marcus had been working in the mining tunnels when Counselor Vextar arrived for his monthly inspection. But these inspections weren't about safety or productivity. They were about selecting which human workers would disappear into the counselor's private chambers, never to be seen again. When Vextar had grabbed young Amy Rodriguez, barely 16 and on her first off-world assignment, Marcus had done what any decent person would do. He had fought back. The trial had been a mockery from the beginning. The Galactic Council's courts were supposed to be impartial, but Sarah had seen how they looked at humans. To them, humanity was still a young species, barely worthy of basic rights. They were laborers, soldiers, entertainment, not equals deserving justice. The lead judge continued reading the verdict with mechanical precision. The defendant's claims of self-defense are rejected. Counselor Vextar was a respected member of the Galactic Council, serving his people for over 3 centuries. The testimony of human witnesses holds no weight against the physical evidence and the word of 17 Carathian citizens. Sarah wanted to scream. Those 17 Carathians had been Vexitar's personal guards and associates. Of course they would lie to protect their dead master's reputation. The human workers who could testify to Vextar's crimes had been threatened into silence or simply dismissed as unreliable. Furthermore, the judge's voice grew even more severe. This act of violence demonstrates the inherent savagery that still lurks within the human species. Despite decades of civilizing influence from the Galactic Council, humans continue to resort to primitive violence when faced with authority. Marcus's lawyer, a nervous Altarian with trembling antennae, made one final attempt. Your Honors, I submit that the defendant's actions were motivated by... The court is not interested in motivations, the judge interrupted. Only facts. The fact is that a young human killed a respected counselor. The fact is that this cannot be tolerated if we are to maintain order in our galaxy. Sarah felt her heart sinking as the judges conferred briefly in their clicking, whistling language. She had known this moment would come, but she had hoped somehow that justice would prevail. She should have known better. In 30 years of military service, she had seen how the galaxy really worked. Humans were useful, but they were not valued. They were tolerated, but they were not respected. The center judge stood to deliver the sentence. Marcus Chen, you are hereby found guilty of first-degree murder and destruction of council property. You are sentenced to life imprisonment in the Tartarus Maximum Security Facility. You will serve this sentence in solitary confinement, with no possibility of parole or appeal. The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. Sarah watched her son's face crumple for just a moment before he forced himself to stand straight again. Even now, even facing life in the galaxy's most brutal prison, he was trying to be strong. Marcus caught sight of her through the glass and mouthed the words, "I'm sorry, Mom." But Sarah wasn't looking at her son anymore. She was looking at the judges, memorizing their faces, their names, their species. She was looking at the Carathian witnesses who had lied under oath. She was thinking about Counselor Vextar's family, his associates, his friends in the Galactic Council who had made this travesty possible. As the guards led Marcus away in energy shackles, Sarah stood slowly from her seat. Around her, other humans from Earth's diplomatic delegation whispered words of sympathy and outrage, but she wasn't listening. Her mind was already elsewhere, already planning. They thought they knew humans. They thought they understood what humanity was capable of. They saw the workers and farmers, the diplomats and merchants that Earth sent to the stars. They saw civilization and cooperation. They saw exactly what Earth wanted them to see. But they had never seen Sarah Chen angry. They had never seen what Earth's most decorated Special Forces commander could do when someone hurt her family. They had judged her son guilty based on lies and prejudice. Now they were about to discover what real judgment looked like. Sarah turned and walked calmly toward the exit, her boots clicking softly against the station's metal floor. Behind her, the judges were already moving on to the next case, dismissing the life they had just destroyed as easily as swatting an insect. They would remember this day, she promised herself. They would all remember Marcus Chen's name, and they would remember what happened when humanity's coldest killer decided that justice needed to be served. The Earth Embassy on Proxima Station looked like any other diplomatic building in the galaxy. Clean lines, neutral colors, and the false promise of civilized discourse. But 3 levels below the public floors, in a room that didn't appear on any official schematics, Sarah Chen sat across from Director Amanda Walsh, head of Earth Shadow Division. "I heard about Marcus," Walsh said quietly, sliding a glass of real Earth whiskey across the table. Her weathered face showed genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry, Sarah, the whole thing was a setup from the start." Sarah stared at the amber liquid but didn't touch it. "You knew this would happen?" "We suspected." Counselor Vexistar had been pushing for stricter human labor regulations for months. Having a human kill him in unprovoked violence gives his faction everything they need to treat us like animals. Walsh leaned back in her chair. "Your son was convenient." "Convenient." Sarah's voice was flat, emotionless. Anyone who didn't know her would think she was taking the news remarkably well. Walsh knew better. "Sarah, I understand what you're feeling, but you need to think carefully about what comes next. The Council is watching Earth's response to this verdict. If we do anything that looks like retaliation, what do you know about my service record?" Sarah interrupted. Walsh blinked at the sudden change of topic. "I know you were Special Forces, decorated veteran. You served with distinction in the border wars before we made contact with the galactic community." "That's the official version." Sarah finally picked up the whiskey and drained it in one swallow. "Tell me what you really know." There was a long pause before Walsh spoke again. "I know that between 2387 and 2391, you were listed as detached duty with no specific assignment recorded. I know that during those 4 years, several major crime syndicates mysteriously collapsed. I know that 3 different terrorist organizations lost their entire leadership within a 6-month period. And I know that you came back with commendations that are still classified 30 years later." Sarah nodded slowly. "Project Ghostwind. Earth's first attempt at asymmetric warfare against enemies we couldn't fight conventionally. They needed someone who could get close to targets, eliminate them without leaving evidence, and disappear before anyone knew what happened. You were an assassin. I was a soldier doing what needed to be done to protect humanity." Sarah's eyes met Walsh's directly. "The difference is important." Walsh leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Sarah, I cannot officially authorize any kind of response to your son's conviction. Earth's position in the galactic community is too fragile. We have to play by their rules." "I understand. But," Walsh continued carefully, "if someone were to take unofficial action, someone who was no longer officially connected to Earth's government or military, well, sometimes these things happen in a galaxy as large and dangerous as ours." Sarah stood up from the table. "I need access to my old equipment. The stuff from the Ghostwind days. That gear was supposed to be destroyed decades ago. But it wasn't." Walsh was quiet for a moment, then reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small data chip. "Warehouse 47 on level 12. Access code is your old call sign plus Marcus's birth date." "Sarah, be careful. The people who condemned your son have resources and allies we can't even imagine. So do I." Sarah pocketed the chip and headed for the door. "Where are you going first?" Walsh asked. Sarah paused at the threshold. "I need to visit some old friends. People who knew me before I became respectable. People who remember what I was good at." 2 hours later, Sarah stood in the dim lighting of Warehouse 47, looking at equipment she hadn't seen in 3 decades. Plasma casters that could fire without energy signatures, stealth suits that bent light around the wearer, identity scramblers that could fool any scanner in known space. Tools designed for one purpose: making people disappear. She picked up a small device that looked like an ordinary datapad but was actually a quantum computer capable of slicing through any security system. Next to it lay a collection of syringes filled with compounds that could mimic everything from heart attacks to rare alien diseases. But it wasn't the weapons that made Sarah Chen dangerous. It was her mind. 30 years ago, Earth's military had taken a brilliant tactician and taught her to think like death itself. They had shown her how to study a target, learn their weaknesses, their fears, their loved ones, their secrets. They had trained her to become someone who could walk into any situation and find the one thread that, when pulled, would unravel everything. The Galactic Council thought they understood humans. They saw Earth's diplomats begging for trade agreements and mining rights. They saw human workers grateful for any job, no matter how dangerous or degrading. They saw a young species desperate to fit in with galactic civilization. They had never seen Sarah Chen in action. She began making a list in her mind. Judge Korthvel Nex, who had pronounced the sentence. Judge Mira Thane, who had refused to allow character witnesses. Judge Veltar Zook, who had called humans inherently savage. The 17 Carathian witnesses who had perjured themselves. Counselor Vextar's family members who had pushed for the maximum sentence. And behind all of them, the real architects of this injustice. The council members who wanted to use Marcus's case to justify new restrictions on human rights. The corporate interests who profited from cheap human labor and wanted to make sure that labor stayed desperate and compliant. Sarah began suiting up in gear that felt familiar despite the decades. As she worked, she thought about Marcus, probably lying on a cold metal bunk in Tartarus right now, wondering if anyone would ever believe his story. Wondering if his mother had given up on him like the rest of the galaxy had. She activated her personal communicator for what would be the last time under her real identity. Her message was simple, sent to every news network and government contact in known space. Sarah Chen hereby resigns her position as Earth military liaison to the Galactic Council, effective immediately. Personal reasons. When the message was sent, she turned off the communicator and dropped it into an incinerator. Sarah Chen, respected military officer and grieving mother, ceased to exist in that moment. Walking out of the warehouse was someone else entirely. Someone the galaxy had never seen before, but someone Marcus's enemies would learn to fear. Earth's coldest killer was going to work, and the galaxy was about to discover what justice looked like when it came from the shadows. Korath Prime gleamed like a jewel against the star-scattered backdrop of space, its massive cities rising in crystalline spires that caught and reflected the light of 3 suns. It was the capital world of the Carathian Empire, home to 40 billion blue-skinned beings who considered themselves the most civilized species in the galaxy. Their cities were works of art, their technology was centuries ahead of most other races, and their judicial system was supposed to be the fairest in known space. Judge Korthvel Nex lived in a tower that scraped the very edge of Korath Prime's atmosphere, a testament to his importance in Carathian society. His home was a masterpiece of architecture and security, protected by energy shields, automated defense systems, and a full squad of military-grade security robots. No unauthorized person had ever set foot in the judge's private residence, at least, that's what everyone believed. Sarah moved through the tower's ventilation system like smoke, her stealth suit rendering her invisible to every scanner and sensor the Carathians had installed. She had been studying Judge Nex for 3 weeks, learning his habits, his routines, his weaknesses. She knew that every evening at exactly 2100 hours, he dismissed his security staff and spent exactly 1 hour in private meditation in his study. She knew that he suffered from a rare neurological condition that required daily medication, and she knew that he was completely alone during those 60 minutes. The ventilation shaft opened into a storage closet 3 rooms away from the judge's study. Sarah dropped silently to the floor and checked her equipment one final time. No weapons that would leave energy signatures or physical evidence. No tools that could be traced back to human technology. Just her hands, her mind, and a small device that could record everything she was about to do. Judge Nex sat cross-legged on a meditation mat in the center of his study, his 6 eyes closed in peaceful contemplation. Around him, holographic displays showed the sacred texts of his people, ancient words about justice and wisdom floating in the air like golden butterflies. He never heard the door open behind him. "Your Honor," Sarah said quietly. The judge's eyes snapped open, all 6 of them focusing on the space behind him. But when he turned, he saw nothing. The voice had come from empty air. "Who is there? Show yourself." "I am Sarah Chen," the voice replied. "I am the mother of Marcus Chen, the human boy you sentenced to life in prison 3 weeks ago." Judge Nex stood quickly, his hand moving toward the emergency communicator on his desk. "Guards! Security breach in." He stopped mid-sentence as Sarah materialized in front of him like a ghost, the stealth field of her suit flickering off. She stood completely still, her hands at her sides, making no threatening moves, but there was something in her eyes that made the ancient judge take a step backward. "Your guards cannot hear you," Sarah said calmly. "I've activated a sound dampening field around this room. We're going to have a conversation about justice." "You cannot be here," Judge Nex whispered. "The security systems, the defenses, are designed to keep out armies and starships. Not one human who knows what she's doing." Sarah took a single step closer. "Tell me about Counselor Vextar." "I don't know what you mean." "The counselor was he was a pedophile and a murderer." Sarah's voice remained perfectly calm, conversational. "He used his position to prey on young humans working in the outer colonies. He killed anyone who tried to stop him, and you knew it." Judge Nex's blue skin began to flush darker. "Those are lies. Accusations from inferior species trying to—" 6 months ago, a human girl named Lisa Park disappeared after filing a complaint against Vextar. 4 months ago, it was David Kim. 3 months ago, Maria Santos. Sarah recited the names like she was reading from a grocery list. "All young." "All filed formal complaints. All vanished without a trace after Vextar's people got involved. Even if that were true, which it is not, the law is clear. Your son committed murder. The evidence was overwhelming. The evidence was manufactured." Sarah reached into her suit and pulled out a small data pad. "I've spent the last 3 weeks investigating your overwhelming evidence. Would you like to see what I found?" Judge Nex stared at the device in her hands. "What is that?" "Proof that your 17 Carathian witnesses were all in Vextar's employ. Proof that the security footage was edited to remove evidence of Vextar attacking the human girl. Proof that the weapon used to kill Vextar wasn't even the one my son was carrying." Sarah's smile was cold as winter space. "Proof that you knew all of this when you pronounced sentence." The judge's 6 eyes darted toward the door, then back to Sarah. "Even if I accept your claims, which I do not, the sentence has been pronounced." "The law does not allow—" "I'm not here to discuss the law," Sarah interrupted. "I'm here to discuss justice. My son is sitting in a prison cell for defending an innocent girl from a monster. Meanwhile, the monster's accomplices live in luxury and continue to profit from human suffering. That's not justice. That's collaboration." Judge Nex straightened, trying to summon his judicial authority. "Are you threatening me, human?" "I'm educating you." Sarah touched a control on her datapad, and the holographic displays around the room changed. Instead of sacred text, they now showed images. Photos of young humans who had disappeared after encountering Vextar. Medical records showing injuries consistent with torture. Financial records showing payments from Vextar to court officials. "Look at them," Sarah commanded. "Look at the children your respected counselor destroyed. Look at the evidence you chose to ignore. Look at what your justice system really protects." Judge Nex stared at the images, his face growing paler. I was following established legal precedent. The testimony of Carathian citizens carries more weight than the lives of human children." Sarah nodded. "Yes, I understand your legal precedent. Now let me explain mine." She moved closer to the judge, who found himself unable to step away. There was something hypnotic about her calm demeanor, something terrifying about the certainty in her voice. 30 years ago, Your Honor, Earth's government trained me to hunt down people who hurt innocents and thought they were untouchable. They taught me that sometimes the law isn't enough. Sometimes justice has to come from outside the system." Sarah's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "They taught me to be very, very good at making evil people pay for their crimes." Judge Nex was trembling now. "What do you want?" "I want you to issue a retrial order for my son. I want you to investigate every case involving human defendants that Vextar influenced. And I want you to think very carefully about how you plan to spend the rest of your very long life." "And if I refuse?" Sarah smiled, and for the first time since entering the room, she looked genuinely happy. "Then you'll discover why they call me Earth's coldest killer. But don't worry, Your Honor. When I come for you, it won't be quick or dramatic. It will be slow, careful, and absolutely final. And the beautiful thing is, no one will ever know what really happened to you." She moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Judge Nex. I've sent copies of all this evidence to 12 different news organizations and 3 separate government agencies. If anything happens to my son while he's in prison, if he has so much as a suspicious accident, then our next conversation will be very different. Judge Nex watched the door close behind her, then collapsed into his meditation chair. Around him, the holographic displays continued showing the faces of Vextar's victims, their young faces accusing him in silence. By morning, the order for Marcus Chen's retrial was filed with the Galactic Court. Judge Nex cited new evidence and procedural irregularities, claiming it was his duty to ensure that justice was properly served. He never mentioned the conversation in his study. He never spoke about the woman who had walked through his defenses like they didn't exist. But for the rest of his very long life, every shadow in every room would remind him of Sarah Chen's promise. Earth's coldest killer had knocked on his door, and justice had finally begun. The luxury cruise ship Stellar Paradise drifted through the void between star systems, its massive hull gleaming with lights from 10,000 viewports. Inside, the galaxy's wealthy elite enjoyed every pleasure imaginable, while servants from dozens of species catered to their every whim. It was a floating city of indulgence, where the powerful came to relax and conduct business away from the scrutiny of their homeworlds. Counselor Yethtar, younger brother of the deceased Vextar, held court in the ship's most exclusive dining room. Around him sat the 17 Carathians who had testified at Marcus Chen's trial, plus several other business associates who had profited from Vextar's human trafficking operation. They were celebrating the successful conclusion of what they called the human problem, toasting their dead colleagues' memory with rare wines that cost more than most species earned in a year. To dear Vextar, Counselor Yethtar raised his glass. Who showed us that humans can be properly managed when you know how to handle them? The group laughed, a sound like grinding metal. They had no idea that their celebration was being watched by someone who had been moving through their ranks for the past 6 hours. Sarah had infiltrated the ship's crew 2 days ago, using forged identity documents that identified her as Kira Nexus, a Zentarian food service specialist. The ship's security had scanned her, processed her credentials, and assigned her to the kitchen staff without a second thought. After all, who would suspect a middle-aged woman carrying serving trays? She had spent those 2 days studying her targets, learning their habits, their relationships, their weaknesses. She discovered that Witness Nexval suffered from a heart condition. Witness Korthmar was allergic to Rigelian shellfish. Witness Thexwan had a gambling addiction that had left him deeply in debt. But most importantly, she had learned that this group didn't just lie at trials. They ran a network that extended across 3 star systems, supplying young humans to wealthy clients who paid enormous sums for exotic servants. Vextar had been their protector and their biggest customer. With him gone, they needed new protection. That's why they were meeting here on this ship away from prying eyes. Sarah moved among them like a ghost, refilling glasses and replacing empty plates. Her stealth suit was disguised as an ordinary servant's uniform, but it still provided protection and recording capability. Every word they spoke was being captured, every admission of guilt preserved for posterity. The problem is maintaining quality control, one of the witnesses was saying. These humans breed like vermin, but finding the young, attractive ones requires careful selection. And proper training, added another. Vextar always said that breaking their spirit early was crucial. Once they understand their place in the galaxy, they become much more compliant. Sarah's hands didn't shake as she poured wine into their glasses. Her face showed no expression as they discussed selling children like livestock. But inside, a cold fire was building. The same fire that had driven her through 30 years of military service and 4 years of classified missions. Counselor Yethtar was holding forth on expansion plans. With the human homeworld now properly intimidated by the trial, we can increase quotas without fear of government interference. Their own military liaison's son was convicted of murder. What message does that send to the rest of their species? That they know their place, laughed Witness Nexval. That they understand who their betters are. Sarah finished serving the table and moved toward the kitchen, but not before placing a small device under Counselor Yethtar's chair. It looked like a piece of dropped jewelry, easily overlooked, but it was actually a quantum transmitter that would broadcast everything said in this room to news organizations across the galaxy. In the kitchen, she activated her personal communications array and began sending coded messages to contacts she hadn't spoken to in decades. Former soldiers from the border wars, intelligence operatives who had worked Project Ghostwind, people who understood that sometimes the law wasn't enough. The first message went to Captain Jake Morrison, who now ran security consulting for mining operations in the Outer Rim. The second went to Lieutenant Maria Santos, who had become a very successful freelance investigator, specializing in missing persons cases. The third went to Colonel David Park, who officially worked for a shipping company but who actually coordinated Earth's unofficial intelligence network. Each message contained the same information: locations, names, financial records, and evidence of the human trafficking network. Each recipient would know what to do with that information. Sarah returned to the dining room to clear away dessert plates, listening as the conspirators planned their next moves. They had no idea that their entire operation was about to collapse around them. 2 hours later, Witness Nexaval retired to his cabin and discovered that someone had replaced his heart medication with a compound that would mimic his existing condition, but prove fatal within hours. The ship's medical bay would record it as a tragic natural death. An hour after that, Witness Korthmar enjoyed a late-night snack that contained just enough Rigelian shellfish extract to trigger a massive allergic reaction. The emergency medical response team would arrive too late to save him, but early enough to confirm that it was a terrible accident. Meanwhile, Witness Thex 1 received a message that his gambling debts had been purchased by new creditors who were significantly less patient than his previous ones. He chose to take a spacewalk without a pressure suit rather than face what they would do to him. By morning, 3 of the 17 witnesses were dead, and 6 more had received visits from people who made them very simple offers: confess to perjury and testify truthfully about Vextar's crimes, or join their friends in the ship's morgue. Counselor Yethtar woke to find his personal accounts frozen, his business associates under arrest, and news organizations across the galaxy broadcasting recorded conversations about human trafficking. Worse, he discovered that someone had been in his cabin during the night, leaving a message on his personal communicator. The message was simple: "Your brother hurt my son. You profited from hurting children. Now you're going to pay for both crimes. This is just the beginning. Sarah Chen." Within 6 hours, 17 separate law enforcement agencies had issued warrants for Yethtar's arrest. His own government disavowed him, claiming they had no knowledge of his activities. His business empire collapsed as partners and clients fled to avoid association with the scandal. But Sarah wasn't finished. The luxury cruise ship docked at Centauri Station, where Yethtar discovered that his private shuttle had suffered a catastrophic engine failure. His backup transportation had been impounded due to unpaid docking fees. His credit accounts were frozen pending investigation. He was trapped on a space station full of people who now knew exactly what kind of monster he was. That evening, as Yethtar huddled in a cheap hotel room, trying to contact anyone who might help him escape, his door chimed. He opened it to find a human woman in a simple gray dress holding a bottle of wine. "Room service," Sarah said with a pleasant smile. "Compliments of management." Yethtar tried to slam the door, but found that his arms wouldn't obey him. The paralytic agent she had introduced to his room's air system was already taking effect. "Don't worry," Sarah said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "This won't take long. I just want to have a conversation about justice." She set the wine bottle on the room's small table and pulled out a chair. "You see, Counselor, I've been thinking about what you and your friends did to those children. All those young humans you bought and sold and destroyed. And I realized that simply killing you would be too easy." Yethtar could only stare as she continued speaking in that calm, conversational tone. "So instead, I've arranged for you to experience exactly what your victims went through. In about an hour, you're going to be sold to a Draxian mining consortium that specializes in dangerous excavation work. They have a reputation for working their laborers to death." Sarah stood and moved toward the door. "The beautiful irony is that they think they're buying damaged goods. Your new owners have been told that you're a disgraced human who needs to be broken and retrained. They paid very little for you, which means they'll have very little invested in keeping you alive." She paused at the threshold. "Give my regards to the other slaves, Counselor. I'm sure they'll be very interested to learn who you really are." The door closed behind her, leaving Yethtar alone with his paralyzed body and his racing thoughts. In the distance, he could hear heavy footsteps approaching down the corridor. Earth's coldest killer had kept her promise. The network that had destroyed so many innocent lives was crumbling, and justice was being served one target at a time. But she wasn't done yet. Not even close. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the deepest levels of Council Station, in a chamber that hadn't been used since the last major war 2 centuries ago. The room was designed for crisis meetings, its walls lined with defensive shields and its communication systems isolated from the rest of the station. Around the massive circular table sat representatives from 47 different species, their faces showing various degrees of concern, fear, and barely controlled panic. Chancellor Zexmoth, the ancient Valdorian who had led the council for over a century, called the session to order with a grave expression. His forearms moved in ritual gestures as he spoke, but his normally steady voice carried an undertone of uncertainty. "We are gathered here to discuss a threat to galactic stability unlike any we have faced in recent memory," he announced. "In the past 72 hours, 17 key figures in multiple star systems have been assassinated, disappeared, or forced to confess to serious crimes. All of these incidents are connected to the trial of the human Marcus Chen." Counselor Rextai of the Carathian delegation shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Chancellor, while these incidents are regrettable, I fail to see how they constitute a threat to galactic stability. Criminal enterprises have been exposed and dealt with. Surely this is a positive development." "The manner of their exposure is what concerns us," replied Ambassador Veclon from the Hegemony Worlds. "Someone is operating outside legal channels, using methods that bypass our most sophisticated security systems. Someone with resources and capabilities that we apparently cannot match." The human ambassador, Dr. Elena Vasquez, sat quietly at the far end of the table. She had been Earth's representative to the Council for only 3 months, appointed after Sarah Chen's sudden resignation. Unlike her predecessor, Vasquez was a diplomat through and through, with no military background and a reputation for avoiding confrontation. The other council members had expected her to be malleable, easily intimidated. They were discovering they had been wrong. "If I may," Dr. Vasquez said softly, her voice barely carrying across the chamber. "Perhaps we should discuss why these individuals were targeted in the first place." Chancellor Zexmoth's 4 eyes focused on her. "I'm not sure I understand your meaning, Ambassador. The evidence that has emerged during these recent events paints a very disturbing picture," Vasquez continued, her tone remaining calm and professional. "It appears that Councillor Vextar was operating a human trafficking ring with the knowledge and cooperation of multiple council-affiliated individuals. It appears that the trial of Marcus Chen was conducted using perjured testimony and fabricated evidence. And it appears that many of you were aware of these facts." A ripple of uncomfortable murmurs ran around the chamber. Several council members exchanged meaningful glances. "Those are serious accusations, Ambassador," Chancellor Zexmoth said carefully. "Do you have proof of these claims?" Dr. Vasquez activated her personal data display, and holographic images filled the air above the table. Financial records, communication logs, recorded conversations, medical records of young humans showing signs of abuse. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "This information has been compiled over the past week," Vasquez explained. "Apparently, someone has been very thorough in their investigation of Councillor Vexitar's activities and the individuals who enabled them." Councillor Rextai stood abruptly. "This is irrelevant to the current crisis. Regardless of Vextar's alleged crimes, we cannot allow vigilante justice to operate within council space. We cannot allow one individual to decide who lives or dies based on their personal judgment." "Can't we?" The voice came from the chamber's communication system, carried by speakers hidden throughout the room. Every council member looked around in alarm, trying to identify the source. "Security breach," Chancellor Zexmoth shouted, but his guards were already checking their instruments and shaking their heads. According to every scanner and sensor in the room, no unauthorized communications were taking place. "Good evening, council members," the voice continued. It was calm, professional, and unmistakably human. "My name is Sarah Chen. I believe you know who I am." The chamber erupted in chaos. Some council members began shouting orders to their security details. Others demanded to know how their supposedly impregnable meeting chamber had been compromised. Chancellor Zeximoth was frantically activating emergency protocols. "Please remain calm." Sarah's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here to have a conversation about justice." "Show yourself," demanded Counselor Mexilor from the Titan Confederation. "Face us with honor." "Honor?" Sarah's laugh was soft but carried a chilling undertone. "You want to talk to me about honor? Let me tell you what I've learned about honor in the past week." The holographic displays around the chamber changed, now showing images of young humans in various states of distress. Medical files, autopsy reports, financial transactions. "I've learned that 23 human children died in Vextar's custody over the past 5 years. Sarah continued. "I've learned that these deaths were covered up by officials at the highest levels of your government. I've learned that my son was convicted of murder for trying to save a 16-year-old girl from becoming victim number 24. Dr. Vasquez watched the council members' faces as the evidence was displayed. She saw guilt, fear, and recognition in their expressions. They had known. Perhaps not all of them, but enough of them to make a difference. "This is exactly what we're talking about," Councillor Rextai protested. "You cannot take the law into your own hands. You cannot decide who deserves to live or die." "You're absolutely right," Sarah agreed, her tone still conversational. "I cannot decide who deserves to live or die. But I can decide who has forfeited their right to continue hurting innocent people. And I can decide what price they should pay for the crimes they've committed." Chancellor Zexmoth had regained some composure. "Ms. Chen, if you surrender yourself for trial, the council will ensure that you receive fair treatment. We can discuss your grievances through proper legal channels." "Like the proper legal channels that convicted my innocent son? Like the proper legal channels that have allowed child trafficking to continue for decades?" Sarah's voice hardened slightly. "No, Chancellor. I think we're past the point where legal channels are sufficient." The holographic display changed again, now showing detailed files on every person in the room. Personal information, family members, financial records, security arrangements. The message was clear. Sarah knew everything about every one of them. "However," she continued, "I am not unreasonable. I'm willing to make you an offer." "What kind of offer?" Dr. Vasquez asked, speaking for the first time since the conversation began. "My son's conviction is overturned immediately, and he is released with full pardons and compensation. A full investigation is launched into Vextar's trafficking network, with prosecutions for everyone involved. New protections are put in place to prevent this kind of abuse from happening again." Sarah paused for a moment. "And I return to Earth and never involve myself in galactic politics again." "And if we refuse?" Chancellor Zexmoth asked. "Then I continue my work. Every person who participated in the trafficking ring, everyone who enabled it, everyone who covered it up will receive a personal visit from me. And unlike your legal system, I don't require overwhelming evidence or unanimous jury votes. I just require certainty that someone has hurt innocents and needs to be stopped." The chamber fell silent, except for the soft hum of life support systems. Each council member was weighing the implications of Sarah's offer, calculating the risks and benefits of compliance versus resistance. "You're threatening the entire galactic government," Councillor Mexilor stated. "No," Sarah replied calmly. "I'm offering to save it from itself. You have a choice to make, council members. You can do the right thing for the right reasons, or you can discover what happens when someone with my particular skills decides that your government is part of the problem instead of part of the solution." Dr. Vasquez stood slowly from her seat. "I move that we accept Ms. Chen's terms immediately. All in favor?" Around the table, hands began to rise. Reluctantly at first, then more quickly as council members realized that they were facing something they had never encountered before. A human who was not asking for permission, not begging for acceptance, not trying to fit into their vision of galactic order. They were facing a human who was telling them how things were going to be. Chancellor Zexmoth looked around the chamber, counting votes. When the tally was complete, he closed his 4 eyes in resignation. "The motion carries unanimously," he announced. "Ms. Chen, your terms are accepted." "Excellent." Sarah's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "You'll find the paperwork for my son's release has already been prepared and is waiting in your private communication queue, Chancellor. I took the liberty of drafting it myself." The communication system went silent, leaving the council members alone with their thoughts and their fears. Dr. Vasquez gathered her materials and prepared to leave. As she reached the chamber door, Chancellor Zexmoth called out to her. "Ambassador, did you know this was going to happen?" Vasquez paused and looked back at him.
"Chancellor, I'm a diplomat, not to earn a place at your—"
Marcus Chen stood in the processing center of Tartarus Maximum Security Facility, holding a small bag containing the few personal items he had been allowed to keep during his imprisonment. 3 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days had passed since his conviction, and he had spent every hour wondering if the galaxy had simply forgotten about him. The other prisoners had told him stories about inmates who disappeared into the system, their families never knowing what happened to them. Now he was being released, and he still didn't understand why. "Transport shuttle departs in 10 minutes, the Nexarian guard informed him, his 6 arms moving efficiently as he processed Marcus's release documents. "You will be taken to Council Station where Earth Embassy personnel will meet you. Any questions?" Marcus shook his head. He had stopped asking questions weeks ago, when it became clear that none of the guards knew or cared about the details of his case. He was just another prisoner to them, notable only because of his species and the unusual circumstances of his release. The shuttle ride to Council Station passed in silence. Marcus stared out the viewport at the stars, thinking about his mother. The last time he had seen her, she had been sitting in the observation deck of the courthouse watching him get sentenced to life in prison. He wondered if she blamed him for destroying their family's future. He wondered if she was even still alive. When the shuttle docked at Council Station, Marcus was surprised to see Dr. Elena Vasquez waiting for him instead of the usual embassy staff. She was a small woman with graying hair and kind eyes, and she greeted him with a warm smile that was the first genuine human expression he had seen in months. "Marcus," she said, offering him her hand. "I'm Dr. Vasquez, Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. Welcome back to freedom." "Thank you, ma'am," Marcus replied, still confused about what was happening. "I don't understand why I'm being released. My lawyer said there were no grounds for appeal." Dr. Vasquez guided him away from the docking bay toward the embassy section of the station. "There have been some significant developments in your case. New evidence came to light that proved your innocence conclusively. The council voted to overturn your conviction and issue a full pardon." They walked through corridors that Marcus barely remembered from his original trial. Everything looked different now, somehow smaller and less intimidating. Maybe that was what 3 months in a maximum security prison did to your perspective. "Where is my mother?" Marcus asked as they reached the embassy's main reception area. Dr. Vasquez paused, her expression becoming more serious. "Marcus, I need to prepare you for some difficult news. Your mother resigned her position with Earth's diplomatic mission 3 months ago. She left the station shortly after your trial and hasn't been in contact with embassy personnel since then." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "She left?" "I know how that must sound to you," Dr. Vasquez said gently. "But I want you to understand that your mother never stopped fighting for your freedom. The evidence that led to your release was gathered by someone who cared deeply about proving your innocence." They entered a private conference room where Marcus was surprised to see several familiar faces. Amy Rodriguez, the young woman he had defended against Vextar, sat at the table along with 3 other human workers from Kepler Station. All of them stood when he entered the room. "Marcus!" Amy rushed forward and hugged him tightly. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry they didn't believe you. I tried to testify, but they wouldn't listen to me." "It's not your fault," Marcus assured her, still trying to process what was happening. "None of this was your fault." Dr. Vasquez gestured for everyone to sit down. "Marcus, these people have something they want to tell you about what really happened during your trial." David Kim, one of the Kepler Station foremen, leaned forward across the table. The day after you were convicted, we all received visits from men who said they worked for Vextar's organization. They told us that if we ever spoke about what we witnessed, we would disappear just like the other workers who had tried to testify against Vextar in the past. But about 2 weeks ago, things changed, Amy added. Those same men started getting arrested. Some of them just disappeared. Others confessed to crimes and started talking about the trafficking operation. Suddenly, it was safe for us to tell the truth. Marcus listened as his former co-workers described the real events on Kepler Station. How Vextar had selected young human workers for his private collection. How anyone who tried to stop him had been eliminated. How the witnesses at Marcus's trial had all been paid to lie. But who gathered all this evidence? Marcus asked. Who made it safe for you to testify? The room fell quiet for a moment before Dr. Vasquez spoke. We don't know for certain, but we have strong suspicions. She activated a holographic display that showed news reports from across the galaxy. Headlines about the collapse of a major trafficking ring. Stories about the mysterious deaths and disappearances of key figures in the Vextar organization. Reports of evidence appearing simultaneously on dozens of different worlds, all pointing to a massive conspiracy that had been operating for years. Someone with extraordinary skills and resources spent months systematically destroying the network that was responsible for your conviction, Dr. Vasquez explained. Someone who had access to information and technology that most governments can't match. Someone who cared enough about justice to take enormous personal risks. Marcus stared at the reports, his mind racing. You think it was my mother? I think, Dr. Vasquez said carefully, that your mother loves you very much. And I think she may have had skills and resources that none of us fully understood. A soft chime sounded from the room's communication system, indicating an incoming message. Dr. Vasquez frowned and activated the display, expecting routine embassy business. Instead, Marcus heard a voice he had thought he might never hear again. Hello, son. Marcus spun around looking for the source of the voice, but the communication was audio only. Mom? Mom, where are you? I'm somewhere safe, Sarah's voice replied, warm with emotion. I wanted to be there when you were released, but circumstances made that impossible. I wanted to hear your voice, to know that you're okay. I'm okay, Marcus said quickly, tears starting to form in his eyes. Mom, they told me you left. They said you resigned and disappeared. I thought you gave up on me. Sarah's laugh was soft and sad. Oh, Marcus, I could never give up on you. But I had to leave my official position to do what needed to be done. The people who hurt you, the people who destroyed so many innocent lives, they couldn't be stopped through legal channels. So I stopped them through other means. Dr. Vasquez and the others in the room exchanged glances. This was the first confirmation they had received about who was responsible for the dramatic events of the past few weeks. Mom, what did you do? Marcus asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. I reminded some very bad people that humanity has teeth when we choose to show them, Sarah replied. I made sure that what happened to you will never happen to anyone else. And I kept a promise I made to myself the day you were convicted. What promise? That justice would be served one way or another. Sarah's voice became more serious. Marcus, there are things about my past that you don't know. Things I hoped you would never need to know. But when they hurt you, when they destroyed your life with lies and corruption, I remembered who I used to be. Marcus thought about the mother who had raised him, the diplomatic liaison who had spent her career trying to build bridges between Earth and the galactic community. He tried to reconcile that image with the person who had apparently brought down an interstellar criminal organization single-handedly. Are you coming home? He asked. There was a long pause before Sarah answered. I can't come home, son. Not yet, and maybe not for a very long time. The things I did to free you, the methods I used, they've made me persona non grata in official circles. But I want you to know that I regret nothing. You were protecting an innocent person from a monster. You were being the man I raised you to be. And I was not going to let the galaxy punish you for doing the right thing. Dr. Vasquez leaned toward the communicator. Sarah, if you're listening, the Council has agreed to amnesty for everyone involved in exposing the trafficking network. You could come back. Thank you, Dr. Vasquez, but we both know that's not entirely true. There are too many people with too much power who will never forget what I did to them. But that's my problem to deal with, not Marcus's. Marcus felt a desperate need to see his mother, to know that she was really safe. Mom, please, can't we meet somewhere, can't we? Someday, Sarah interrupted gently. When the galaxy has had time to forget about Earth's coldest killer, when it's safe for both of us. Until then, I want you to live your life. Go to university, find someone to love, build the future that Vexitar tried to steal from you. The communication system began to fade, indicating that the connection was being terminated. Mom, wait, Marcus called out. I love you, son. Sarah's voice came through clearly one last time. I love you, and I am so proud of the man you've become. Take care of yourself, and remember that justice isn't always about laws and courts. Sometimes it's about people who love you enough to fight for what's right. 5 years had passed since the events that the galactic media had dubbed the Chen incident, though most official records simply referred to it as a period of significant law enforcement cooperation between multiple star systems. The Galactic Council had worked very hard to minimize the story of how one human woman had brought down an interstellar criminal organization and forced the galaxy's most powerful government to negotiate on her terms. But the effects of Sarah Chen's actions rippled outward like waves from a stone. Dropped in still water, Marcus Chen, now 24 and a graduate of the prestigious Centauri Engineering Institute, stood in the assembly hall of the newly constructed Human Rights Monitoring Station. As the youngest department head in the station's history, he oversaw a team of investigators from 12 different species, all dedicated to preventing the kind of abuses that had once been routine in the outer colonies. The quarterly report shows a 73% decrease in missing persons cases involving human workers, Marcus announced to the assembled staff. Additionally, we've processed 42 formal complaints this month with full investigations completed on 37 of them. Most importantly, we've had 0 cases of retaliation against complainants. Amy Rodriguez, now his deputy director, nodded approvingly. She had joined the monitoring station 18 months ago, bringing with her a fierce determination to protect workers like she had once been. The new protocols are working. Word has spread through the labor networks that workers have real protection now. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had been promoted to Secretary General for Human Affairs, watched the briefing with satisfaction. In 5 years, she had overseen the creation of the most comprehensive human rights protection system in galactic history, but she knew that none of it would have been possible without the fear that still lingered in the minds of those who remembered Sarah Chen's campaign of justice. After the briefing, Marcus walked alone to his office, a spacious room with a view of the station's central plaza. On his desk sat a small collection of personal items, photos of his graduating class, commendations from various governments, and a simple wooden box that contained the only communication he had received from his mother since his release from prison. Inside the box was a data chip containing a single message. Received on the anniversary of his release, proud of you. Keep fighting for what's right. Love, Mom. He had tried countless times to trace the message's origin, but it had passed through so many relay stations and encryption protocols that its source was impossible to determine. His mother had become a ghost, present everywhere and nowhere, watching over him but never revealing herself. Marcus was reviewing case files when his personal communicator chimed with an urgent priority message. The sender was listed as anonymous, but the security protocols were unlike anything he had seen before. Marcus, his mother's voice filled the office, as clear as if she were standing beside him. I hope this message finds you well. I've been watching your work with the monitoring station, and I couldn't be prouder of what you've accomplished. Marcus quickly sealed his office and activated privacy screens before responding. Mom, is that really you? Where are you? I'm closer than you might think, but still far enough away to stay safe. I'm contacting you now because there's something you need to know. Something that affects not just you, but the future of human relations with the galactic community. The office's holographic display activated, showing a star map with several systems highlighted in red. Marcus recognized some of the locations as recent trouble spots where human rights violations had been reported. Over the past year, I've been tracking a new threat, Sarah continued. A coalition of species that believes the Chen incident was a sign that humans are becoming too dangerous to tolerate. They're working behind the scenes to reverse all the progress that's been made, to return humanity to second-class status. Marcus studied the star map, his mind racing. How serious is this threat? Serious enough that they've begun recruiting mercenaries and corrupting officials in the outer systems. They're planning something called Operation Correction, a design to provoke incidents that will justify new restrictions on human activities. Sarah's voice carried the same cold edge that Marcus remembered from their last conversation 5 years ago. What can we do to stop them? We? Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. Marcus, you're not trained for this kind of work. You're an engineer and administrator, not a soldier. Your job is to build the future, not to fight wars. Then what are you going to do? There was a long pause before Sarah answered. What I've always done. What I was trained to do 35 years ago. I'm going to remind these people why it's a very bad idea to threaten human children. Marcus felt a familiar chill run down his spine. Mom, please. Isn't there another way? Can't we handle this through official channels? Official channels didn't save you from Vextar's conspiracy. Official channels don't protect the workers who are disappearing again in the outer systems. Official channels work when people are reasonable and honorable. Sarah's voice hardened. These people are neither. The star map changed, now showing detailed intelligence reports about the coalition's leadership. Marcus recognized some of the names from diplomatic briefings, influential figures from species that had never been comfortable with humanity's growing influence in galactic affairs. I want you to understand something, son, Sarah continued. What I'm about to do will probably end any chance I have of ever coming home. The galaxy has a long memory for some kinds of justice, but it will ensure that you and every other human in the galaxy can live without fear. There has to be another way, Marcus insisted. We've built something good here. The monitoring station, the protection protocols, the international cooperation. We can use those systems to do what? File reports while people die? Hold meetings while children disappear? Issue strongly worded statements while families are destroyed? Sarah's voice carried the weight of decades of experience. Marcus, I spent 30 years trying to work within the system. Sometimes the system works. Sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't, someone has to step outside it. Marcus thought about Amy, about the other survivors of Vextar's trafficking ring, about all the young humans working in dangerous jobs across the galaxy, who depended on the protections they had built. What do you need from me? Nothing, Sarah said firmly. I need you to keep doing exactly what you're doing. Keep building the future. Keep fighting for justice through legitimate means. Keep being the man I raised you to be, but nothing. Your path is different from mine, and it should be. You represent the best of what humanity can be in the galactic community. I represent what happens when that community threatens what we love. The communication began to fade, indicating that Sarah was terminating the connection. Mom, wait. When will I see you again? When Operation Correction has been permanently canceled, Sarah replied. When the people who think they can hurt humans with impunity have learned better. When the galaxy is safe for the future you're building. How will I know when it's over? Sarah's laugh was soft and sad. Trust me, son. You'll know. The communication ended, leaving Marcus alone in his office with the weight of knowledge he couldn't share, and the certainty that somewhere in the galaxy, his mother was preparing to become Earth's coldest killer one more time. 3 months later, news reports began filtering in from the outer systems. The mysterious disappearance of Counselor Thexmore from the Draconis Alliance. The tragic accident that claimed the life of General Vectool while he was inspecting mining operations on Rigel 7th. The shocking confession of Admiral Nexivore, who admitted to planning false flag operations designed to justify military action against human colonies. One by one, the architects of Operation Correction vanished, confessed or died under suspicious circumstances. News organizations across the galaxy began connecting the incidents, realizing that someone was systematically dismantling a conspiracy that most people had never known existed. Dr. Vasquez visited Marcus during this period, ostensibly for routine administrative meetings, but actually to discuss the implications of what was happening. The pattern is unmistakable, she told him during one of their private conversations. Someone with extraordinary resources and capabilities is eliminating threats to human security with surgical precision. Any idea who might be responsible? Marcus asked, maintaining the fiction that he didn't know. I have my suspicions, Dr. Vasquez replied. But I also have the wisdom to understand that some questions are better left unasked. 6 months after their last conversation, Marcus received another anonymous message. This time it contained only coordinates and a date. When the date arrived, Marcus took leave from the monitoring station and traveled to the coordinates, which led to a small planet in a system that didn't appear on any official star charts. He found a simple dwelling built into the side of a mountain, surrounded by gardens that showed unmistakable signs of human cultivation. Sarah Chen sat on the porch of the dwelling, looking older than Marcus remembered but somehow more at peace. She stood when she saw him approaching, and for the first time in 5 years, mother and son embraced.